If the first disciples didn't call themselves Christians but rather saints, faithful, and the assembly of God, then what does that say about us today? If the earliest disciples didn't see themselves as Christians, then who were they? What was their faith? To answer that, we need to travel back, not to Antioch, not to Rome, not to later church councils, but back to Jerusalem, back to the city where Yeshua taught in the temple courts, where his disciples prayed daily, and where the movement was born. Acts 2 paints the picture. After the Spirit was poured out at Shavuot Pentecost, the believers didn't scatter to form a new religion. No, they devoted themselves to the apostles, teaching, to fellowship, to breaking bread, and to prayers. Where did they pray? In the temple. What calendar did they live by? The calendar of Israel's feasts. What scripture did they read? The Torah, the prophets, and the writings. In other words, their faith was not Christianity. It was the faith of Israel, fulfilled in the Messiah. Now think about this. If you had walked through the streets of Jerusalem in the first century and asked...
It's weird that he says the faith of Israel and not Judaism. I wonder why. I mean, that's a choice, right? I wonder.
Those early disciples who they were, do you think they would have said, "We are Christians"? Never. They would have said, "We are the remnant of Israel who believe the Messiah has come." And this is crucial, because it wasn't only Jews, Gentiles, non-Jews, were joining them. But notice carefully how Paul describes it. In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 12 to 13, he writes to the nations, "At that time you were without Messiah, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers to the covenants of promise. But now in Messiah Yeshua you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Messiah." Did you hear that? He doesn't say they became members of a new religion. He says they were brought into the commonwealth of Israel. They were grafted
They're brought near.
in, adopted into God's covenant family. Romans chapter 11 uses the same image. The wild olive branches, the nations, being grafted into the cultivated olive tree of Israel, not replacing the tree, not starting a new one, but becoming part of the very people of God. So the faith of the first believers wasn't about leaving Israel behind. It was about Israel's Messiah opening the gates so that the nations could enter. That's why Paul calls this the mystery, that Gentiles would be fellow heirs, members of the same body, and partakers of the promise in Messiah Yeshua, Ephesians chapter 3, verse 6. This is the original faith.